there's always going to be this common problem of balancing like the creative work versus the business work. That's going to be true no matter how big your business comes. I think it's true even for artists who have staff.
I am super excited to finally be sitting down and asking all my burning questions to Betsy Cordes. Betsy Cordes is on a mission to inform and empower artists as entrepreneurs so they can promote themselves more confidently, advocate more effectively for the value of their work, and become true leaders in the business arena. We could all use that. She believes that developing a successful art-based business is an art form in and of itself, and she wants to help more artists define what that looks like for them. Super important work. So for more than 10 years, she has advised artists one-on-one through February 13 Creative, a business and brand advising agency. And in late 2019, she launched the Art Brand Alliance, a professional organization dedicated to the needs and interests of entrepreneurial visual artists, those who are building multiple income stream businesses based on their arts, passions, and values. So as you can imagine, Betsy not only has a ton of expertise, but I mean, such a juicy history of working with artists, and I have all the questions for her. I am in the Art Brand Alliance, and it is a wonderful organization. So I just can't wait to dig in with Betsy. Betsy, welcome.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. Thank you for asking me to do this. Thank you for being part of the ABA, and thanks for everything that you're doing to help artists as well.
Oh, I love that.
It's really a pleasure to be here.
Yes. So to get things started, can you please give us sort of a brief overview of your art career? I'm sure you have a lot to say, but how did you get started as a creative entrepreneur?
Yeah, I could talk about this for a long time, so feel free to just like if I'm going on. I want to say though that I do like talking about it because it's taken me a long time to find my groove, and I think that there are a lot of people who can really relate to that. And so I'm an elder now. Officially, I turned 60 this year, and I really feel like it's only been within the last, like, if I'm being honest, like 3 to 5 years that I have really found my groove. I mean, I'm kind of here to tell you, like, if you can relate to what I'm saying at all, like, am I ever going to figure out my space in this professional world? Keep the faith. And yeah, I have had, while I've always been involved in some way or another with art and with, kind of creative pursuits, it's been a long and winding road. Like, I studied art history in school. When after college and grad school, I went to work for nonprofit organizations that supported the creation of art in public places, public spaces. So I worked for a great organization in New York City and one in here in the Bay Area. And so even though that wasn't particularly entrepreneurial, it obviously like gave me a lot of insight into all that's required to bring a big creative vision to life, and kind of like interfacing with lots of different kinds of people and agencies and businesses and organizations and so forth. So that was awesome work. At some point after I had my one and only child, I kind of got this urge to start like tapping more into my own creativity. And I actually started, I was in the kind of like, I was teaching myself graphic design in effect, but it was around making invitations and announcements for special occasions for individuals. So like birth announcements, wedding invitations, and so forth. And I actually started a small business doing that. Kind of, this was like way before the internet and before it became like a lot easier to do that without like funding, which I didn't have. So, but the cool thing about that was that it led to an amazing invitation to join the advertising team at Macy's, the department store, which is based here in, it was at the time, the advertising department for Macy's was based here in San Francisco. So I went to work as a graphic designer at Macy's, and I was still doing, I was lucky enough to be able to do like really special kind of like invitations and things, mailers for like big, like special events and special customer services that they had. So it was still kind of like in that same
Love that.
space of creativity around, around more personal kind of like, more kind of like just bespoke and personal experiences. So that led to, believe it or not, becoming an art director for a greeting card company, and then kind of like multiple greeting card companies after that. It was it was through my work as an art director that I obviously met so many wonderful artists and started
Mhm.
having these very deep and meaningful conversations about not only like the projects that we were working on together, but the kinds of things that they were wanting to do in their businesses and the challenges that they were coming up with. And
Goodness.
so that sort of, as you can see, sort of like leads me to where
Yes.
I've been for the last 10 years, which is 10 plus years now, which is really like working with those artists, and particularly artists who I think of as like being more entrepreneurial. So
Mhm.
in the more like commercial art world, we have this, I think it's kind of a false dichotomy, but it's kind of like um, there's fine art and there's commercial art,
Mhm.
right? And I love how that is breaking down now, by the way, but that's a whole other conversation. But in the commercial art space, you know, before the internet, it was all like kind of, it was much more, the artist was more anonymous in a way. It was
Mm,
more about kind of like serving the client and creating for the client's needs and specifications.
right.
And the internet suddenly made it possible for artists to like be there kind of like the captains of their own ship and kind of go like, oh, I want to put my art on some greeting cards that I make and sell those directly to people. And oh my gosh, look, here's Facebook and Instagram, and I can actually advertise for free to people.
Mhm. Mhm.
So and I love that kind of like entrepreneurial spirit of those
Yeah.
artists who are taking advantage of everything that the internet was offering and just like diving right on in. And and that's what inspired me to start February 13 Creative.
Oh,
So
that's oh so interesting, all of that. Ooh, I want to dig into so much.
yeah.
The art, you know, having that art director greeting card, art director experience is like, oh, that's so interesting to me because I personally love greeting cards. And one thing that is, you know, sort of central, has become central to my work is the fact that I did work for 10 years working in-house as textile designer for bedding, for home linens, and for apparel.
Mm,
And so that in-house, I mean, I wasn't a design director, I was just, you know, mid-level artist, but I was in some of the smaller companies, I was in the meetings and I saw what was happening. And that's what artists these days don't have. They don't
yes.
have access to the information of what it's like, what's it's like on the other side. So that's exactly what someone, you know, could get coming to you, because you as someone who has been an art director, who has been in those type of meetings and knows what it's like to get a pitch coming to you, you have that information, and that is so valuable to people. And you know, we're so lucky that those resource, you as a resource exists, and that the internet provides that for so many different people. So given your experience working with art brands, creative business owners, you know, you've seen all the ripples and ebbs and flows of everything. And, you know, being an entrepreneur yourself, you know that it's full of fun ups and downs. You just kind of got to go with.
Yeah.
Um, how would you say that the art industry has changed? I would say since you were an art director in-house, maybe that's like, you know, slightly pre-internet. I'm not sure
Mhm.
exactly when that time frame was, to, you know, some of the artists that you see and work with, or have in the Art Brand Alliance now. How has that changed?
Yeah. It was such a big
I know.
question. All your questions actually, I love them. So yeah. when I started, the very first greeting card company that I worked for, it was in 2000. So it was the what we call the first .com boom,
Mhm,
the old
mhm.
timers, right? So I'm speaking for myself. But it was, so it was called cardstore.com, and it was one of the very first companies where the consumer could order a greeting card and basically like personalize the whole thing online. And then we printed it and put it in an envelope with a stamp on it and mailed it to your customer. So it's a
Oh,
really cool
nice.
company. Um, and I was their very first art director. And when we wanted to work with an artist, we worked with agents exclusively. There was no such thing as like basically going directly to an artist, or there was really no kind of way of knowing who was out there and what they
Right.
had. It was all
Yeah.
through agencies. So 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 obviously like the internet, as we were talking about earlier, really like blew that whole thing wide
Yeah.
open. Um, so the other thing though that's interesting to me now in retrospect is being able to see how artists have basically allowed so many of these platforms to, or they've been a big part of what has created the success of these tech platforms, right?
Mhm,
And we're supplying content,
mhm,
and we're bringing the eyeballs and the buyers to that content.
mhm.
So artists have been like huge drivers in the growth of many of these tech companies, and now we're at a place where we really feel that shifting. Like, being on Instagram is no longer anywhere near as effective as it used to be. Even like online advertising, which has frankly like been out of reach even, early on in terms of price for many artists, is now like
Not as much.
really difficult to break through.
Right.
So there, like you said, there have been some incredible ups and downs. The other piece of kind of like, and tech plays into this, that's super fascinating to me over the last 10 plus years, is how many artists have discovered this thing called licensing,
Mm,
right?
yeah. Yeah,
like
totally.
like I don't think most artists, except for those back then who like worked with agents, really knew what that was. But one of the things that excuse me, that the internet has done, obviously, and you and I know all about this, is like giving us a platform to
Courses.
teach,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
And so that has been beautiful because it's been part of empowering artists in the business arena. And at the same time, I think we both know there's been a really like a huge influx of artists in who want to license their work.
Mhm,
There, it's made more competition, which isn't
mhm.
necessarily a bad thing.
Right.
Um, but from my perspective, it has also um, brought like a lot of art into the kind of like the marketplace and the our awareness, where like it's all kind of, a lot of it starts to feel like the same.
Mm,
Like we're seeing the same stuff over and over and over again. And that is why I really like working with artists and helping artists to discern what is their unique visual voice and style, and not only visually, but what is their like wider kind of point of view, and
mm.
how do they share that with the world through their work and through the platforms that they're sharing on. So that gets into kind of like my whole philosophy around the art brand as a business model. And yeah, so just like the huge influx of
Yeah.
artists licensing has been really exciting. But I think it does come with some challenges.
Yeah, I think
And
the internet is
yeah,
such a big, like, yeah, it's like pros and cons, right? The availability, the way that it can reach, like you can have your own, you can start your own platform, have your own soapbox basically, and you can do your own, research and learn so much about things and build your own business, and that is incredible. But also, so are so many other people, and it is really such a, it's like, I feel like sometimes I have students who are, discouraged by how much competition and how difficult it is, and it is difficult, but then it's also like, well, imagine what it was like 20 years ago, like you would have to like fly to New York City and like knock door to door at like companies that you like found in the newspaper? Like, what would you even, I don't even know. Like you did, I mean, they had the artist guide, those big thick books, and it was like
Yeah.
somebody's mailing address, and you were out here like look, I started working in New York City in 2003. That's when my career began.
Okay.
And my first interview was with a 36 by 24 inch portfolio that I lugged through the city, 3 different interviews. And
Wow.
so, you know,
Wow.
I mean, the idea of like, it's hard for me to push send on my email is like, yeah, you're right, it is. I'm not discounting that there is like fear and anxiety and you know, I'm not discounting any of that, but it's like nothing is easy, right? And
Yeah.
no matter either direction, you know, you kind of just have to figure it out. And that is the tricky thing about the art industry, probably forever, like before.
Yes.
And, you know, there's always
Yeah.
something to figure out.
That's so true, Elizabeth. Yeah. I love that
Um,
perspective. You're
I
also making me super nostalgic for like New York back in the day.
oh my gosh, carrying that. I lived in Connecticut, and so when I had my first interview, just a little short aside,
Yeah.
I said I was in Connecticut, and they had me come. This was at a West Point Stevens,
Yeah.
now West Point home. And I said I was in Connecticut, so I think he thought like I was in like the coast of Connecticut, where it's like a commuter rail right in, which I did take the commuter rail, but I lived in Northern Connecticut, so I was driving down, taking the commuter rail, whatever.
Yikes.
So he had me do 3 interviews, like for like a test, like a tech test, and for like whatever. And each time I'm carrying this huge portfolio, and you know, it took me 2 hours, 2.5 hours of travel both
Wow.
ways, and all that
Wow.
stuff. I was just in for the day. Like it was
Right.
like I was willing to do it because hey, and then I got a job, like I got a full-time job in New York City. Like I wasn't complaining, but I also wasn't complaining because it was really heavy.
I love
Um,
that.
but yeah, you know, there's getting started is never easy, I guess.
Exactly.
Well, gosh, I have these questions, and then it's like everything you're saying makes me want to ask 100 other questions, but
Well, we can do this again sometime.
so I guess I know you're not a fortune teller. This is a really difficult question. So if you want to say like, forget it, let's talk about something else. Where would you say you see the industry moving based on current trends and company and artist needs? You know, you are in touch with, through the Art Brand Alliance, lots of really successful artists, and you're seeing, you know, kind of into their careers and their struggles. What are you seeing, you know, at this point, and potentially like thoughts on how you know, art licensing maybe specifically is moving? Because especially art licensing, you know, I do a lot of freelance work, but I also license my art, but especially art licensing has changed significantly in the last 10, 15, 20 years. And I have artists who are you know, in their 50s and 60s come to me who have been successful licensing artists for years, and now it's not paying the bills the way it used to.
Right.
And because I talk about freelancing, they're asking me freelancing questions. And so I know that art licensing isn't, even for those established artists, isn't paying what it used to, or isn't quite the same. What are your thoughts on that specific part of it?
Yes. This is real. Yeah. There's lots to talk about here too, right?
Yeah, I know. I have a feel maybe I should just block off the rest of the day, because we've got
Exactly. I'm good with that. Yeah, I love talking about this stuff, and what you're asking, what you're pointing to is really important. And so we talked just a minute ago about how kind of like social media, online advertising, all that stuff, like fast becoming like unreliable for us in terms of like spreading the word about our work. I think another factor here is like during the pandemic, right? There were like supply chain disruptions started, and the cost of materials like skyrocketed, and we're still seeing the effects of that. It just seems to have a really long tail in terms of how like manufacturers, licensees are thinking about their collections. I think I've heard, you know, secondhand, I've heard about like companies like folks who've worked with a particular licensee for a long time, hearing that licensee talk about, well, we're really getting much more focused in our collections, which is
Mm,
basically another word for fewer collections. I mean, like smaller collections,
less
right? So we were talking just a moment ago about this huge like influx of artists in the licensing arena. And now we're talking about shrinking opportunities potentially for licensing.
mm,
Um, and so that is, I think we're going to see that. I think you're talking about this in a way in the examples that you just shared.
mhm,
Um, and I think that on the one hand, that is probably going to translate to fewer opportunities so not as many artists will be getting these opportunities to license. On the other hand, I think it points to potentially like kind of much more rewarding and meaningful collaborations for the artists who are chosen.
mhm.
um, and I think that it's like all the more reason to think about the work you're doing in terms of your brand. What do you bring to the market? What do you bring to licensees that is distinctive? That is, as I was saying earlier, kind of like not only about your art and its like distinctiveness, but about kind of like the whole audience that you've been cultivating
Mm,
by sharing your work and sharing your art, your passions and your worldview, and all of the things that are important to you, like the whole kind of like person behind the art.
yeah, yeah.
So I mean, and just like on a completely different note, but let's talk about AI for a second, because
Oh God. I don't want to talk about it. Yes, no, we can.
right?
No, I mean, I've been getting asked this like literally every day for the
Yeah,
last
yeah,
month. Yes.
it's
So it's
real. I
huge.
mean,
It's huge.
it's very worrisome
Drop my
for
papers.
reasons. Yeah.
For that outburst, I dropped my papers. But yeah,
I,
AI for
I
sure.
know. Yeah, you're not alone. It's there's a lot to pay attention to here. It is very worrisome, particularly the image generation AI, right? So
Of course. For
Mid-Journey,
us, it
Dolly,
is. For
all
us,
of that.
it is.
Yeah,
Other
exactly.
industries, I think about it, it can be such a great tool. And I'm already like looking into it as, like how can it help me with my video creation, and how can
Yep.
I've been using things that it's like it'll find clips for me, like after I do this interview I can have a machine tell me like, here's some hot points that Betsy made, and I can do little
Right.
clips, and it's like that's amazing. Now a video editor is out of work because of that. Like, not
I
that I have
know.
a video editor. I it saves me time, but if I was a video editor, I'd be very worried about that, and
Yeah,
same for the images.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
mid
It is. It's a total double-edged sword, because there are ways in which I think it's going to make it much more feasible for little individuals to run like businesses more like efficiently and potentially very much more successfully, because of all of the ways that these tools can like assist us in stuff like you're talking about, or in like there are even examples now of basically like using AI to design a whole marketing campaign,
Mhm.
um, to write a whole marketing campaign, to do like develop the strategy, and those tools are only going to become more powerful, and they are going to pose both threats to certain aspects of types of like earning a living types of livelihoods, but they're also going to enable other things. It's really hard now to say where this is all going. I just feel like it's very important for us to not close down about it, to
Right.
not, and I can say this as someone
Like the part
like
where I said, let's not talk
I'm
about it.
at that point of my life where I'm like, okay, when is the next big tech innovation going to happen where I become like my parents and I'm just like I tap out, like
That wasn't TikTok for you, because that's where I'm at.
it was TikTok, but here I'm actually kind of like strangely open to AI. It scares me for a lot of reasons. Just been reading recently about the energy consumption involved in making AI possible. That is horrifying, and the effects, the like kind of social and cultural impacts that has, and like communities where these data centers are located. Like this is stuff that we all need to educate ourselves about and
Yeah.
be aware of, as uncomfortable as it is.
Mm.
So yeah, I mean, we could go on and on about this,
Yeah,
right?
that's true. AI,
Yeah,
and it's an interesting conversation for sure. I mean, people are really the artists, all the artists forums that I'm in, everyone's talking about it.
yeah.
Um and I think uh that, I imagine based on what you have already told me that, some one sort of way to put yourself to stand out from AI is that building of a brand. And that is something interesting, very interesting to me, because as someone who did come from in-house and as someone who does a lot, makes a lot more money freelancing than I do from art licensing,
Mhm,
I'm used to, I have my own, like things that I like to draw and like to do, but I am pretty versatile. I have a pretty versatile skill set, and I like to experiment. I like to do things all over the place. And when artists come to me worried about their signature style, I'm often like, yeah, I don't have I've been doing this for 20 years. I don't think I have that much of a signature style. So it just depends on where you're trying to get. um
mhm,
and that sounds like something that you probably addressed through February 13th, or
mhm,
February 13th, your creative coaching business.
mhm.
I know that art brand advising is your specialty. What would you say is a common thread, if any, in your work with art brands and creative business owners? Like, what are you seeing? What problems come up all the time, or what is a signature style? I have to imagine is one of them. People must, I feel like I need to book a session right now to talk to you about what I how to find my signature style or whatever. But
Mhm, mhm.
what are some things that are common among art brands that you're regularly troubleshooting?
Yeah, this is so thanks for asking about this. I first I just want to say I know there's often a lot of confusion for folks about like what I am. Like, am I a coach?
Yes,
Am
tell
I
us.
an agent? Am I like what am I? I don't actually have a good term for myself except I tend to land on advisor. So
I like that.
and even like the word consultant feels not quite right to me, but I think of an advisor as someone who's more like a sounding board.
Mm,
And so I don't have other than, the art brand as a like sort of paradigm or a business model, a way of a kind of like more of like kind of philosophical, like lens on what you're doing, with your art and in the world of in the marketplace. Other than that, I don't really have a formula or kind of like step by step instructions for how to make
mhm.
it as an artist.
Right.
It's more of a strong belief that like your distinct voice and view matters. And when you can start to share that through your art, as well as through your writing and through your teaching, and through the way that you conduct yourself in business, like
Mm,
I think that artists have this kind of um, hard to define, hard to pin down, hard to pinpoint, but definite power that the world needs more of right now. And
mm,
so my work with artists, to kind of try to answer your question, isn't really so much about helping them pinpoint. I mean, there's a little bit of that kind of like identifying your one signature style and how do you kind of get closer to that, but it's far more exploratory than that. And actually a lot of it has to do with getting comfortable in the world of business, because
mm.
I think that, and you and I know this from working like on the other side, like in-house, like all those people over on the other side, these businesses that are approaching you, they're just human beings,
100%.
right? And more
Yes.
often than not,
Yes.
actually, you're lucky enough probably to be working, like interfacing with like an art director or creative director, someone from the creative team who totally gets like who you are and like, what you care about and all of that stuff. And so number one, to kind of like just I really work with artists kind of like to try to demystify a lot of this stuff and to help them um figure out how to be themselves within the world of business,
Yes.
to be genuine and to feel a kind of like confidence. So a lot of that has to do with kind of like demystifying basic sort of like licensing terms and contract terms, and kind of like strategies around how creative teams in-house like develop a collection, like what you were talking about, uh, and helping them see the the tremendous like value that they're bringing
Oh my
through
gosh.
their art.
Speaking my
And
language.
right. And to like,
All of this is resonating so hard. Yeah,
yeah,
this is
and
what I feel
to
like I do as
advocate.
well. Yeah.
Yeah, and to like advocate for themselves. And when you advocate for yourself, you're also by extension like advocating for artists in general and the value of art and artists in the marketplace.
Oh my goodness.
So
Yeah.
that's a lot of my work is very like my most popular thing in through February 13 Creative is called an art brand strategy session. And it's basically like a big old questionnaire, and then we talk for 2 hours, and it's a super free ranging conversation. It's a very much about the artist who's in front of me for that session. Like it's not, I'm not like repeating myself a lot. Instead, I'm like really like meeting the artist where they are.
I love that.
And a lot comes out in the questionnaire about what their goals are, what their strengths are, what their weaknesses are, their questions, insecurities, like all of that jazz. So it's super fun. It's it's yeah, I love that one-on-one work. Yeah.
That's wonderful. Yeah, all of those things hit so hard. And that's so necessary because I see it. I see it too with my students as well. Because I mean, my course Start Your Service Pattern Business is for those artists who have a decent handle on the art. Maybe they I mean, obviously no one, we're always working on our art, but have a some art, but really need to understand the business side of it. And what I see is the same, is that need for confidence and that need for understanding that that the people on the other side are human. They're not these like overlords, and that if you send a bad pitch, you're not on a blacklist forever, and like it's not that serious, and
Yes.
it's okay.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
also all of that sounds very necessary. All the work you're doing sounds very necessary. I know people need it because I see it all the time for sure. And so that kind of work, I mean, I have to imagine then that is what started to maybe give you the ideas for Art Brand Alliance in 2019. What is that? What motivated you to open this community? Can you talk about what Art Brand Alliance is, and
Yeah.
sort of how you decided to start it?
Yeah, totally. The Art Brand Alliance is a professional organization. So in the same way that we have like the Graphic Artists Guild or the Society of Illustrators or the Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators, like all AIGA, right? Like we all know what those are. It dawned on me basically about 4 years ago that it seems that there's been no new professional organization for visual artists since before the internet like kind of changed everything, right?
Yeah.
So there all of the existing professional organizations for visual artists they're fantastic. So like they have done and they do really good and important work on behalf of visual artists, and they each have their own kind of like niche or perspective on it, and they're all really valuable. The thing that I was seeing though was that none of them were really talking to artists who were much more like entrepreneurial, who were building like multiple income stream businesses. So they weren't specifically kind of like client focused, as we were talking about earlier, but they were opening Etsy shops or their own kind of like e-commerce online stores. They were building like huge followings on Instagram, for example, and really bringing their own sales to their own stores, like without the need for any kind of middlemen. They were also like receiving incredible kind of like offers and deals from companies that license art, and they were doing that without like needing agents, right? The deals were coming to them. So I was really just struck by how, again, I keep saying it, but the internet really changed everything for artists.
Yeah.
And so just to kind of like step back and look at this from a different angle for a minute, which is more personal, like kind of how did I make that transition or decide to get into the Art Brand Alliance after having done this one-on-one work for so long? Um, because one-on-one work has been, and I think always will be, just super meaningful and juicy for me. For the longest time, I thought I didn't want to work with groups. It just like it didn't really appeal to me because I like really meeting the individual, like where they are.
Mm.
And but that kind of started to shift for me, and I guess it was 2017, 2018. First I did a Ana Victoria Calderon and her sister Maggie invited me to do a retreat with them in Mexico. And it was the first time that I'd worked with a small group all at the same time, and it was like transformative to me. It really opened my mind to those possibilities. I went on and led some mastermind groups, and at some point, as I was saying, I'm like, hang on, there's no professional organization here. And I think that that's like, I wanted to be able to bring together all of these different types of artists at different levels of their career and different levels of success and whatnot. And I wanted to kind of bring them all in one place around a kind of common cause, which was really like learning to become a better advocate for yourself, a stronger, more confident business person, and to help one another through what there's so much learning that you have each like
Yeah.
accomplished on
Mhm.
your own, like through your hard work. And yet, it's easy to just be very kind of like isolated and not in community and like sharing that stuff. And I really truly believe that when artists have a safe and like professional container where they can share what they know and share their questions with kind of like confidence, and there's a great deal of integrity and trust, that will the everyone will rise together.
Right.
It's better for
Right.
everyone.
Yeah.
So yeah, so that is kind of like the thinking behind getting the Art Brand Alliance started.
Yeah. That is, I mean, ooh, yeah. There is so much wisdom in seeing the need for that, and then to actually execute it, of course, is like
Mm.
the the part where it's like you can see it, but the fact that you had the energy and the motivation, and I've been watching you build it so deliberately. You're so thoughtful about each and every step of making this alliance a bigger thing, and that's having you at the helm is a wonderful thing for this organization, and as it grows, I'm just excited to see,
Mm.
because it's a really wonderful resource. It's if you're an artist watching right now and you're in some Facebook groups where people ask questions and you're thinking how useful those Facebook groups are, Art Brand Alliance is that times 10, because it is a little bit more private. It has more professional artists in it because it is a professional situation, and you're getting really the information that you need. Not only can you ask questions and get answers, but Betsy and lots of the other Art Brand Alliance members are doing workshops and all types of different educational content within the alliance. So my next question is, the lineup of artists in Art Brand Alliance is pretty amazing. Just looking at, if you go to the website and see some of the testimonials and stuff, it's incredible. Having name recognition is obviously helpful in building clients. Being high profile can be great, but we know it's probably, I'm just saying probably, I don't know for sure. I'm guessing it's not a magic fix. So what is something that, when you're working with bigger name artists versus maybe more commercial? So like, I consider myself more like of a commercial sort of behind the scenes. I don't think of myself as much of an art brand. I mean, I wish I was, but I'm still, still building that part of my business. I'm just sort of doing the behind the scenes work in most cases. Even if I do have, fabric lines and things like that, it's still not like a major recognition situation. So what is something that when you're working with big name artists versus more like mid tier or behind the scenes artists, are the business concerns and goals really different from people who are kind of like higher up the food chain, let's say, than those who have smaller clients or less experience? Or is it always kind of, are we always sort of having the same struggles? I feel like I know that I have not the same struggles as my students, but I also have some of the very same struggles, being, let's say, mid-tier to beginner. So I have to imagine it's similar, but I'm curious as what you've seen as far as some of the discussions in Art Brand Alliance and whatever, for some of the like bigger name, more experienced artists versus some of the more beginner artists.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of feel like in a lot of ways you just answered the question in much this
I talk too much.
In much the same way. I think that there are differences, but there are also similarities for sure. And like I'll just name some of the biggest similarities I see. Like there's always going to be this common problem of balancing like the creative work versus the business work, right? Like that's going to be true no matter how big your business comes. I think it's true even for artists who have like staff, to help them run the show. It can be really hard to keep that balance between just creating for the sake of creating to grow as, the artist that you are, the artist that you want to be, following your curiosities just for the sake of doing that. It's critical to your business. And yet all of the day-to-day kind of like management of things can really overwhelm that. So just safeguarding your creative time is a challenge for everybody, no matter what. And then I think similarly, like the balance between your like all of that business stuff and that creative stuff, and then you're just basically like kind of mental and physical well-being, like just taking good care of yourself. That's a challenge for everybody. And I think that there are some fears that share a kind of like common thread. So when you're at an earlier stage of your business, there's this fear of like, kind of like, what if no one likes my work enough? What if people don't want to buy what I want to create? Those are very common things that I hear. And on the other side, like on the successful side, there's this related thing, which is, what if this all just like dries up overnight? What if my star has like my what is it? I'm gonna mix metaphors.
Yeah, my 15 minutes are over or whatever. Yeah.
Exactly.
I hear you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I mean, basically, I think that what can happen is like all of these fears like can push us to really unhealthy levels of like working and like just grinding. And then there's burnout, there's illness, injury. So again, getting back to the balance idea, which is kind of like the holy grail, right, for all of us, is and it just requires a lot of self-awareness and a lot of self-discipline. So those things I think are common for everybody, no matter how big and successful you get, or how much of a newbie you are in the biz.
Yeah, I agree. That rings true for sure. I think there is some sort of expectation that when you get to a certain point, then you can chill out, and that doesn't happen. So you have to make those chill out points for the whole, you know what I mean? You have to choose to chill out because there's, you're like, oh, well, I just need to, once I have a good client base, or once I'm making a certain amount of money, or once I, whatever, feel really comfortable with Adobe Illustrator, or whatever your current goal is, you are thinking, once I get there, then we're good. And it's like, no, there's just new stuff. So you have to say like, no, well then I am going to slow down, or I am going to make sure to take some time. Right now I've been working pretty hard these
I
last.
know you have. Yeah.
Well, yeah, but no, I don't think I work harder than I do. Let me just say, I will say for the record, it seems like I work very hard.
Mhm.
It isn't quite as bad as it usually looks.
Okay.
I do have some contractors that help me out, and also I'm very efficient. So I'll say
Oh,
that.
good.
But
Okay.
in the last like month, I have been working quite hard, and I'm already like, can I just take off all of June? I don't know if I can yet. I haven't had time to assess, but but that's the thing. You have to be able to, like, you're your own boss, and that's the great thing about it, and the hard thing about it, because sometimes you just are like, I'll just keep pushing, but you have to
Yeah.
really remember
Yeah, it
the
never really feels safe to stop, like,
exactly.
pushing,
Yeah. Oh
right?
my
Yeah.
God. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
So let me, I still have more things I want to ask about, but I want to make sure that we address this. And then if we have time, we'll ask one more question. But
Okay.
really,
Good.
the most, something that is super valuable to anyone watching is, how do artists get involved with the Art Brand Alliance? I know it used to be, look, I applied twice before I got in. So no, I'm
Thank
absolutely
you
joking.
for being
I mean,
patient.
it's true, but
Yeah.
I'm
Thank
not,
you for being
I'm
patient.
absolutely teasing. But what, how can people get involved, basically?
Yes, thank you for asking this. And I apologize to
No, no,
you
no.
any
I was
and really
totally teasing. You do not need to apologize.
like anybody else who's felt like this, like the last thing I want, and the last thing anybody in the ABA wants, is for it to feel like this elite kind of like organization. It's really meant to be very like community, open-hearted, open-minded, welcoming, inclusive, like all of that good stuff. I think that in the beginning, you know, well, I mean, a number of things happened, and I don't want to get too derailed about this, but if it's
Yeah,
helpful
you
for
don't have to
people.
defend yourself. I didn't mean to put you on the defensive.
Yeah, I mean,
I
it's
was
important.
teasing.
I appreciate an opportunity to kind of like talk candidly about this,
Sure.
because um these values of like accessibility of what we're offering in the ABA, and inclusivity, like they're super, super important to us. And I know that in a way, because we were by invitation in the beginning, and because we were only kind of like admitting people into the ABA very slowly, it didn't look that way. It didn't look inclusive or accessible, and that has bothered me. But at the same time, I was constantly balancing like what the kind of like culture that I wanted to create. And I knew that there would be a lot of interest in what we were offering, particularly because I'm lucky enough to have some fantastic connections and people who wanted to help me get this thing off the ground, right? And people who had like major name recognition within our world. And I knew that it would be a popular thing. And I really wanted to be able to work with a smaller group of folks to really kind of like explain what the Art Brand Alliance is, so that through our marketing we could be really clear about who it was for, and about who it might not be for, and to help people think more clearly for themselves about whether membership in the ABA was right for them. So I'm very happy to say we are at that point. And now basically go to artbrandalliance.com, and there's a very short kind of like intro page. If you like what you read there, join our mailing list. We are opening to new members now 4 times a year, so once per quarter. What is it? We just had one at the end of March. The next one's in June, then September, and then December. We open for 1 week each time. And if you're on our mailing list, you'll hear about it. You'll receive all of the information that you need to have to determine whether or not the ABA is a good fit for you and your sort of like professional needs and aspirations, and you can join. It is an annual membership. It costs $325 a year currently, which I think most people would agree is a pretty amazing bargain for what we're offering. And again, that gets back to the idea of accessibility. And also the power of kind of like the group mind, like that
Yeah.
we can offer that kind of value because of our members being so invested in lifting one another up and in making the feasibility of making a living as an artist, like making that a potential, a reality, a potential for more and more people, and helping them understand how to do it. So so yeah, that's the short answer. There's also like, I mean, this, Elizabeth, like it's basically me and a couple of very, very part-time contract folks who help me make the ABA what it is right now. There's also my partner, Chuck, who is an intellectual property attorney who brings a lot of value in the legal forum, kind of like answering
Yes.
members' questions about licensing agreements and trademark and all kinds of like small business kind of like legal issues. But basically I'm wearing a lot of hats.
I know. I know. Well,
And
that's the thing,
yeah,
yeah,
and
we're
and
building this,
so
it's difficult.
I think that in terms of marketing and like what you can find, like when you go to artbrandalliance.com, um, I need to do more to tell the story up front more effectively. So just if you resonate with what you read there, jump on our mailing list. I'm going to be telling you a lot more, and importantly, you'll have an opportunity to join once a quarter as long as you're on
Right.
our mailing list. Yeah.
Right. I hear you. I hear you. So that is how you can join Art Brand Alliance. I'll definitely have the links in the description. And then February 13th Creative that's also, I'll have your website there and they can check out any of your services there.
Yeah. Yeah.
That brand strategy, art brand strategy session, you might be seeing me fill out that form very soon. So I am so grateful. There's so much more I want to talk to you about. You're obviously an incredible resource.
Mhm.
We might have to have a part 2 at some point, but
I
for
love that.
today, I am so grateful to have finally connected with you. And hopefully, I know the audience will get a lot out of this. So
Mm.
I'm grateful for having chatted with you, Betsy.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. This has been really fun, and I'd be happy to do it again sometime. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm really grateful to you for asking me. Thank you, and thanks for what you're doing in the Art Brand Alliance too, and helping make that a reality.
Head to elizabethsilver.com/learn if you want more straightforward support with surface pattern design and creative business. Learn all about how to create successful licensing collections, how to build your surface pattern design business, how to quickly get a pitch out to a potential client, or how to use Adobe Bridge. And be sure to check out some targeted help I have with portfolios and my free workshop ready for surface pattern clients. There's a lot to see at elizabethsilver.com/learn.